Miracles. Who knew? I didn't know that was going to happen. All right, give me 1 second to get that reconnected. Fun times. Remove it, reconnect it. Yeah, for real. Have you ever asked her about how? Those are fun. She says stuff like, I don't want to talk about how. I love it.
I asked her, you Google. And she's like,
oh yeah, she gets very offended if you compare her to Google. Like she really does.
Mine in my room won't stop playing Despacito.
Oh, are you serious?
At night, I have to have my radio going because it's a sound thing I grew up with. So
yeah.
I keep it going in my room. And every night, the first song I ever hear, and like 3 songs after is Despacito. And it keeps going. I'm like, this is what you like, isn't it? And it's like, no.
That would not be cool.
So
all right.
I go to sleep, I just hear Despacito.
So hallelujah, we made it work. I'll start that one over there now that this one's going. Thanks for being patient. Yeah, they put fiber in a couple weeks ago. They went all through the neighborhood and dug trenches in everybody's yards. And then amazingly, they covered them up. And it was wild. Like they covered them up and you couldn't even tell they'd ever been there. I don't know how they did it that well. Okay, don't go there. Come on, do your thing.
You can't cover the yard with duct tape.
Why
And
not?
attach it to stick
But you can.
to the grass.
You can take the sod. Yes.
It'll just come up.
You've never done
That's
it.
been weird, all right.
Have you?
Yes.
Why?
I don't even know what that's about. All righty.
It's
That's
dirt.
it.
It's not showing it.
If you
Okay, gang. So here we go. We'll go ahead and we'll start since we've been graced with internet and God knows how long it'll last. Or
And Alexa's not dead.
there'll probably be a point where it just goes again. And yesterday we were thinking, okay, this should be a part of the day, but it was gone all day. And Jason's upstairs and all of his calls are all internet calls, they're all computer calls, right? So he's got his phone like balanced on the windowsill because in the schoolroom, like the best way to get any cellular coverage, just like right on the edge. So he's got his little phone on, and he kept having to bump it and nudge it because it would lose, and he was trying to keep it linked as his hotspot all day. It was no fun. So anyway, so we're moving on to carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins today. So carbohydrates and lipids was the first section. And when we get talking about carbohydrates, we are talking about these naturally occurring compounds that are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So they're a hydrate of carbon, a carbohydrate. And your hydrate part is the hydrogen and oxygen, which is a water, right? And then you have carbon. You have a certain number of carbon and you have a certain number of water typically. And then, and they're always just these three. It's just how are you combining it? They are the most widespread organic substances in the world. So if I say carbohydrate, like if you think about somebody who says, well, I'm on a low carb diet, like what comes to mind? What are they avoiding? Bread, yeah.
Rice.
Starches, what else?
Cake, brownies, cookies.
Keeping me out of a job. Yeah, that kind of stuff, right? All right, so starches and sugars and things of that sort tend to be what people on low carb diets are avoiding. You'll hear that a lot, low carb diet, right? But carbs play a vital role in life. You have to have them, all right? Now, your structures of carbohydrates, like I said, are hydrates of carbon. And this gives you an example. You'll have a certain number of carbon. You'll have a certain number of hydrogen, which is always going to be double that oxygen, right? Because you've got your H2O thing going on. And then you have 3 types. All right, so let's look real quick at the roots. And, oh, I know on the next page, there's one that I caught. So I'll tell you where it is, because I caught it last time. So there should be a pluralized word that's not pluralized. Anyway, here's the Latin and Greek root thing again. So forget the saccharide part and just look at mono. What's mono tell you? 1. And di tells you what?
2.
2. And then poly.
Many.
Yeah, many. Right. Okay, good. So we have one saccharide, two saccharide, and many saccharides. So then we have to know what the saccharide means. So monosaccharides, these are what we call our simple sugars, most common of which is glucose. You'll see why it's the most common in a minute when we get to how the others break down.
Yeah.
So mono meaning one, saccharine means sweet. Have you heard saccharine in any product before? Does it sound familiar at all? So when you go to restaurants, they have those little packets on the table, all the different sweeteners. What colors are they usually? There's usually 4 if they have all the kinds of sweeteners.
Pink, blue,
White, pink, blue, and yellow. Right. Okay. So the white one is what? That's sugar. Okay. And yeah, the yellow one's Splenda. That's sucralose. What's the blue one usually?
What? Yellow coffee, remember that?
That sounds familiar.
So the blue one is, its brand name is Equal usually, right? And that's aspartame.
Abby, some just don't remember.
The pink
I
one,
don't remember the good old days.
y'all good. The
Yeah.
pink one is one of the ones that's been around longest. And the pink one is usually Sweet and Low, or it used to be Sweet and Low. And it's saccharin. So if you've ever seen saccharin or heard of saccharin, it's Sweet and Low. That's the pink one. It has little music symbols on it and all, and it's like, oh, Sweet and Low, like a little song, like a jingle. Been around forever. It's also like the nastiest of them all. But so saccharin means sweet. So you've got one sweet. So that one sweet, two sweet, or many sweets. That's how you get your monosaccharide, disaccharide, polysaccharide. So your number of carbons is usually going to range from 3 to 7. Though when you get into oligosaccharides, you get into those that have like a whole bunch, right? And then your monosaccharide, if your name, now this is something to know, but I'm not going to hold you responsible for this part. If your monosaccharide name ends, they usually end with an ose. Okay, you're going to see the ose on a lot of words. So, glucose, maltose, dextrose, sucrose, right? These are all the ones, you've heard these, you've seen it before. If you've ever turned over a package of something, what'd you say? What did you say? Overdose. Yeah, you can overdose on, you get enough sugar in you. You could go into like a diabetic coma or something. Sure, I'm sure I could do it to you. Overdose. So if your sugar is in an aldehyde group, if that's your functional group, then you've got your root and then your CHO structure. It's known as an aldose. You don't have to know these, but just be aware it's a thing. Your ketones, if that's your functional group, you've got your root and a carbon, and then, there's oxygen and another root, blah, 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 blah. You get ketose. Yes.
Why is there just a big?
That gap, I think I'm intentionally covering something weird there, but I don't remember when I put it together. That's not the one I was talking about.
Or something.
Yeah, there's something there that was odd or didn't copy correctly. So I was like, And then depending on your number of carbons in the sugar, they may also be known as trioses, which is 3 carbons, pentoses, which would be how many carbons? Pent would be 5, and then hexoses would be 6. So if you look at this graphic, oh, it's all good. That would be an octose if it was a thing. So here's an aldose and a ketose. But if you look here at the bottom, here's your triose, 3 carbons. Pentose is 5, hexose is 6. This one is glucose. Again, your most common. And where are you going to find glucose in your body?
Everywhere.
Everywhere is right. Everywhere is correct. Absolutely everywhere. And it is a hexose. So our disaccharides, are we good over there, guys? Come on, keep your hands to yourself. Y'all are like preschoolers with your hands. I swear. Okay, so it's so weird. It's like
Very unsafe.
they're like little people that grab at each other all the time. So you're like little people that do the whole, little kids all grabbing at each other every 2 seconds. I got one who's always grabbing at people in this one, and then I got 2 that like snuggle in the other class. All right, so for this one, yeah, they do. So I got our disaccharides, 2. So think about this. This makes perfect sense if you just kind of work through it mentally. You got 2 monosaccharides, right? When they undergo dehydration, which is also condensation, they become a disaccharide. So condensation means what in the scope of a chemical reaction?
Water is green.
We formed water, right? So wouldn't it make sense that you could also call that same reaction a dehydration? You've taken the water out of the equation and put it over here. You have a separate water. So you've condensed it, you squashed them together, you condensed it, you took the water out. You've also dehydrated it, you took the water out. And you've got a disaccharide now instead of 2 monosaccharides. So remember I said it's carbons and then water. Take a water out, carbons stick together. That makes sense, right? Makes perfect sense. It's pretty logical if you just kind of follow the argument. So during this process, you have, Alex, you have a hydroxyl group of 1 monosaccharide combines with the hydrogen of another monosaccharide, and then you release your molecule of water, and you get a covalent bond. Your covalent bond between a carbohydrate molecule and another molecule is called a glycosidic bond. All right, so you're going to have glycosidic bonds in your big, long carbohydrate chains. And they are also sometimes called glycosidic linkages. And then there are types. There's alpha types and beta types. I'm not going to hold you responsible for it, but know that they're there. Alpha types are formed this way, your OH group on the carbon 1, and then your beta or this way, your OH group on carbon 1 is above the ring. So is it below or above the ring plane? This is where organic chemistry gets real fun. But know there are alpha and betas. It's a thing. Now your polysaccharides. Okay. Now we got lots, right? Poly many. So these are long, long, long chains, and you've got a bunch of glycosidic bonds the whole way. Okay, and they can make all kinds of different shapes. You can have, for example, you've got this kind of rope-looking one here, and then you've got a branched one. So they can be branched or unbranched, and they can contain different types of monosaccharides. So it's not like you've got sucrose and sucrose all together. You can have sucrose and glucose and dextrose or whatever, and they can all be combined together to make a big, long polysaccharide chain. And they can be extremely heavy because they're big, 100,000 Daltons or more, right? Depending on the number of monomers joined. So we're talking about
How much is a Dalton?
how much is a Dalton? I don't know if I could. Does she know? Alexa, how much is a Dalton? I bet she has no idea.
Do you want to know the price for Dalton?
No, that's cool.
You can buy
I don't know what he charges.
Outside the whole
Dalton,
city of
the
Dalton.
closest I could find on Amazon is Imagine Me, personalized just for Dalton, pronounced Dalton. It's $19.95.
Hey, Alexa. Yo, Alexa,
You
cancel.
can buy
Wow.
a Dalton.
I don't, yeah, I was gonna say, that's my old neighbor's name. That's weird. All right, so he's for sale.
Also at Dalton, Georgia, so we can just buy the.
It's the unit you're using for measuring molecular mass. So anyway, starch, glycogen, cellulose, and chitin are primary examples of polysaccharides. All right. Starch, you know what starch is, right? Carbohydrates in general, starches. We work with starch. Yeah.
A Dalton,
You found it?
wait,
How many pounds is a Dalton?
Oh gosh.
no, a
That-
Dalton or unified atomic mass unit.
yeah.
It's 3.661 times 10 to the negative 27.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna remember that. Yeah. There you go. I was not gonna remember that. There you are. Glycogen. All right. Cellulose. Now, cellulose and chitin we'll talk a fair amount about next year. Cellulose in particular. I'll just tell you chitin first. Chitin is found in fungus. Chitin is the, it's, how do I put it? It's one of the structural units in fungus, like it's the structural unit of mushrooms and stuff, for example, chitin. Now, cellulose, does anybody know what cellulose is?
Type of sugar.
Is
Okay.
there walls around the cells or something?
Yes, okay, so chitin. Cellulose is the material that composes plant cell walls, all right? You know plant cell walls are rigid, right? Do you remember that from when you did like science when you were little, right? And then animal cell walls are not rigid, but plant cell walls are rigid. And cellulose, I can't even look at these today. Cellulose is what composes them. So when you look out there and you see all the trees, that's a lot of cellulose. All right, now, animals cannot digest cellulose. We cannot digest cellulose. So when you eat a salad, all of those cell walls from those plant cells are composed of cellulose. You can't eat, you can't digest that. So where does it go? Say it again.
No.
Right. It's basically what we call fiber. When we're talking about dietary fiber, you need high fiber food. If you didn't have cellulose, it would be really hard to poop because it's what bulks up your solid waste and helps get it out of your body.
And
Right?
There was that he said that.
No.
Okay.
So now, if cellulose is what composes Are you good?
I just.
No,
I think we just dropped Zoom. Oh, no, there it is.
never getting.
If cellulose is what, listen, if cellulose is what composes plant cell walls, all right, but animals cannot digest it, how are termites eating wood?
Very.
I don't even know what termite is, I'll be honest.
So we're actually going to do an experiment with termites next year that is a behavioral experiment. It's going to be cool. So termites, like if you live in the north, it's not such a deal, but down here, it's a really big deal. Like almost every house has had some kind of termite issue in the south, especially around here. You have to have, if you own a home, you have to have a termite bond where they come out and charge you between like $300 and $600 every year to check the little stations around your house, take a 2-minute trip around your house, look at them and go, oh, no termites. And then, you know, you pay a couple $100 and they sign a piece of paper that says there's no termites in this house. And if you've had termite damage, it can really cause you problems if you're trying to sell your house or whatever, because they can cause major structural damage. They're tiny. They're a little bigger than ants. They're white. They look kind of white and rubbery, almost like you would think a maggot would look, but they're sort of look like ants. They have longer abdomens and they're white usually. And they eat wood. They just plow through it. They will eat, you know, the support beams of a house, no problem. Just mow it down. But they can't digest the cellulose either. There's actually a microbe in their gut that does that for them. If it weren't for the microbe in their gut, they couldn't live because their only food source, they can't even digest on their own. So interesting, right? Yeah.
Is there some termites that are like mutantly not grown with that?
I don't know. They probably wouldn't survive if there were.
Like that. You're one.
It was
so
funny
you
too
thought that
because
lucky.
so like for the experiment with the termites next year, it says in the teacher guide to get your termites, it says order them from a supply company, okay, which I got pricing for, whatever, or take a walk in the woods and start turning over logs. And I'm like, I don't know if I mean, I like walking in the woods and turning over logs, but I don't know how many wild termites I want to bring in the house and be like, sure, come into my house, termites.
And then have
So-
kids mess with him.
A little frightened. So anyway, carbohydrates. All right, we can break our carbohydrates down into two main groups, simple and complex. Your simple ones are your mono and disaccharides, and then your complex ones are your poly and oligosaccharides. All right, now, this is what I want you to notice. It's particularly important for biology next year since we're headed that direction. Your monosaccharides have that one sugar unit we talked about, right? And your monosaccharides are going to be glucose, galactose, and fructose. I love galactose because it sounds like sugar formed on a foreign star somewhere because it's just fun sounding. And then, you know, fructose obviously comes from fruit, plants, right? Then you got your disaccharides, which are lactose. Where does lactose come from? Where do you find it? Where?
Dairy.
Yeah, dairy. Okay, find lactose in milk. And then lactose is going to break down into glucose and galactose. So far we've got glucose over here, right? And then one of our disaccharides is going to break down into glucose. All right. The next disaccharide is sucrose. That's sugar that like table sugar. That's sugar, cane sugar, right? And look, it also breaks down into glucose and fructose. And then we have maltose. This is sugar you get from like grain and stuff. Whoop! I did not mean to hit that button. So, and maltose is going to break down into glucose, and so is this one. Trehalose is going to break down into glucose and glucose. So far, every simple carbohydrate that you eat is going to break down into glucose because glucose is the one we use in our bodies, and animals too, right? All other animals. If you look at your polysaccharides, starch and glycogen both break down to glucose. And then there, look at this guy by himself, cellulose. There it is, dietary fiber. Breaks down into nothing. Can't use it. Can't digest it. There it is all by himself, right? And they even called it dietary fiber, in case you weren't clear on what the cellulose
What
was.
is it made out of? Like what are the?
We can look up
Yeah.
we can look it up, but it's a big old chain, right? And then over here in your oligosaccharides, these are 3 to 10 sugar units. So these are big. Raffinose, stachanose, and verbicose. And look, here's glucose again if we're going to keep breaking stuff down. So most of these things are going to break down into glucose, and all the things that we eat are going to break down into glucose except for that cellulose again. So carbs in general, again, condensation. We said that simple sugar molecules, or this is the one I think that, is this the one that doesn't have it? No, it's on one of these next couple slides, missing a plural. Simple sugar molecules or monosaccharides can be combined to form larger sugar molecules called disaccharides or even polysaccharides. And that's condensation, or what's the other word I said makes sense? Condensation or what? Dehydration, right? Yeah, makes perfect sense. This reaction in which simple sugars combine to form larger ones is known as condensation or dehydration. And it's called condensation because what gets generated? Water, right? So this is showing a glucose and a fructose joining together. Da-da-da. Yay, that's how it works. So hydrolysis. So if it's condensation or dehydration to form them, hydrolysis is breaking them apart. And what are we breaking them apart by? What's this? Yeah, water. If we took water out to join them, we can put water in and split them. So this word lysis, you'll see lysis more in biology a lot, and it means to split or to break or cut. So this is literally breaking or splitting by water. So that makes sense too. So it's the reverse of condensation in which the polysaccharide or disaccharide is broken into their constituent monomeric, I cannot speak sugars, known as hydrolysis, so broken by water. So here's the water, you throw them in, pop, they come apart. Look at that, what do you know? And there again, it's called hydrolysis because the water molecules needed to cleave the glycosidic bond. Okay, cleave. This is one of those weird words in the English language. Do you know why it's particularly weird? Anybody know? So in this case, we're using cleave. And what do you suppose it would mean in the context of the sentence? Break. Okay. Cleave is a word. It's one of very few that means the exact opposite if it's used in that context. So you can use cleave to mean bring together or join, and you can also use cleave to mean break apart. It's a weird word. So in biology, we use cleave a fair amount, especially when we're talking about cell division. We use cleavage, the word cleavage a lot. And oh, what do you mean? Oh, two things break apart. Oh, cleavage. Now I know where that comes from. Oh yeah. Now we're all on one page. Now we're all on one page. All right. And but it can be used to mean the exact opposite, and probably the most common reference to it being the exact opposite is a biblical phrase where it's talking about marriage, and it says like a man will leave his family and cleave to his wife, meaning join. So I don't know why this word is like, there are very few. There's like, you can count on your one hand the number of words like that in English language, and this is one of the wacky ones that means exact opposite. Y'all still laughing about cleavage?
Yeah, it's a funny word.
So here's an interesting biological thing on cleavage. Oh, I love giving you guys weird biology things. These are my favorites. This is why I love biology. So I'm gonna love this because every one of you is gonna squirm. All right. Female primates in general do not walk around or crawl around on their knuckles or whatever, or swing from trees with permanently enlarged breasts, except humans.
I did.
Why? Think about it. Think about our closest genetic relatives, which are bonobo chimpanzees, genetically speaking, closest genetic relatives. Their females only have enlarged breasts when they're nursing babies. So why do female humans wander around that way? Well, there's one difference between female humans and other primates that's really obvious when you look at how we move.
Walking?
We walk standing upright. Male primates follow female primates from behind, and as they're chasing, what are they looking at? They're behind. And they're literally looking at cleavage, butt cheek cleavage, not kidding, dead serious. That's what they're looking at, right? And there is some biological component that attracts male primates to that. I'm not kidding. They look at that and they go, oh, I like her. So they will chase down this female primate because that's how they approach her. That's how they see each other. And even if they're not from behind, it's always accessible to him. If she moves around or he moves around, it's always accessible. It's always visible, right? But we don't approach each other that way. Typically, when humans meet humans, we approach each other face to face. So there is a theory that the reason female humans, I love it, have permanently enlarged breasts, which do not occur in other primates, is because we needed something to draw the male of the species the way we meet them, which is face to face. So There you go. Because we don't walk around with our rear ends in dudes' faces, we would never reproduce because they would never be attracted because that's biologically what they're going for. So, guys, next time you're at the zoo and you see the gorillas and they're running around, boys, you know, and they're all, you see the back sides of them, or the orangutans, be like, oh yeah,
Monkeys are so funny.
that's the predecessor to, yeah. Monkeys are fun. But anyway, I digress, but I love that
The
one.
sentence that they usually approach them from behind is just.
But they do, think about it.
I mean, yeah, but like,
I mean, they're usually, I mean, they, that's the way they mate, everything. So that's what they look at. Isn't that fascinating though? I mean, that's cool.
it's like hilarious.
I love that. Okay, back to carbohydrates. So how did we get to there? Cleavage. That's how we got there. We're talking about
I
cleavage.
think it's pronounced clavage.
Cleavage.
I could be wrong.
So anyway, we didn't have cleavage on the back side to be admired, so we developed cleavage on the front side to be admired, and there we go.
So funny, holy.
So obviously, I'm telling you, if you haven't signed up for biology next year, you should. It's going to be great fun. So the reaction mechanism,
That's not as gross as the possums.
possums are the best.
Oh yeah, the possum is.
Hey guys.
I love possum. Yep, right?
You wanna know.
So the reaction mechanism for condensation reaction is the exact reverse of the reaction mechanism for hydrolysis, which makes sense, right? If you're either breaking the monosaccharides apart, or you're joining them together, taking the water out, or putting the water in. Okay, lipids. So now we're moving on to lipids.
Fun.
Lipids are fats, fatty acids, that kind of thing. So you got a little lipid chart here, which shows you you've got your lipids, which are fatty acids and glycerides, non-glycerides and complex lipids. When we talk about, remember when we talked about like dissolves like, we were talking about solvents and solutes and all that kind of business. So these are your fatty acid things, which are the greasy stuff when you think about it that way. They're non-soluble in water. And so, for example, I was trying to clean something yesterday for hours. I've been working 2 days on it and I couldn't get it clean. It wasn't coming clean. And I finally decided to go with like dissolves like, and I got some coconut oil out because I knew that what I was dealing with was similar to a lipid-based substance. And lo and behold, it worked. Should have done it hours before, but apparently I'm not a smart chemistry teacher. So anyway, I got it to work because lipids are non-polar and I needed that non-polar business going on. So any class of organic compounds that are fatty acids or their derivatives are going to fall into this lipid category. Non-polar. Water is what? Water is what? Polar. Remember? Water's polar. Lipids, fats are non-polar. And if you remember surfactants, what was special about them?
Oh.
They were bipolar, right? So those bipolar molecules were great because one end of them grabs onto the lipid, one end of them grabs onto the water, and they can clear away grease from your dishes when you're washing. Insoluble in water, but great organic solvents. Okay, so you know anybody who takes injections in belly fat? I take a couple different ones. A lot of people would do that. There's some injections, especially like the kind that they give you can take it home on your own. You just get a little belly fat and stick it in. And then there are the kind of injections that you get like in your muscle, right? So the ones that you get in your belly fat or other body fat is because those are going to be soluble in a lipid. And they're using your body fat, the lipids in your body fat, as the solvent for that particular medication so that it can be usable in your body. So these are going to include things like natural oils, waxes, and steroids. Okay, so steroids, when I say steroid, what do you think of?
Baseball.
There you go.
Be real.
That's a good one. Baseball's a good one.
Baseball ever.
So you went immediately to the type of steroids that people use for performance enhancement, right? Right. So, and you can, look, this is crooked. So those exist, right? But there are also steroids in your body that are just part of your normal process. They exist in your body and your body produces them and they're needed as part of your normal processes. And one of the things that steroids do is help reduce inflammation. So if you've ever had asthma or croup or an infection that was bad, your doctor may have given you a steroid, which is basically adding to the process your body's already doing. It's like
on topical steroid for eczema.
Yes, I do that every day. So yes, topical steroids for eczema, that's another one too. It's anti-inflammatories.
What's mine called
Oh, you have fluticasone, yeah, Flovent. And before that was budesonide, yep. So
Sweet.
steroids are lipids, and while there are the kind, yes, that you can, I love it. While there are the kind that you can add to your system, there are the kinds you produce naturally. Now, they can have different effects, and some of them, as some of the younger kids knew, some of them can do stuff like increase testosterone production. So when you hear about, like the guys Jack referenced, right, the athletes that use performance enhancing steroids, in that case, it's not so much anti-inflammatory as it is performance increasing. Like if it boosts testosterone, then it can boost muscle build and all this other stuff. But increased testosterone can also increase aggression, all sorts of things. So if you've ever heard the term roid rage, like there was a time when roid rage was a thing amongst bodybuilders because those guys would take performance enhancing steroids so they could get really buff, and then they'd be furious all the time. So now you have these like super He-Man looking like guys that are ready to tear up the world because they're all messed up on steroids. And even the steroids you can take from the doctor can do that. Like Decadrone is a common one that's given for croup. If you've ever had croup or had a smaller sibling get croup, for adults, it's the same virus that causes laryngitis, but in kids, because their anatomy isn't the same, it causes this barky cough.
Yeah.
And if you have a younger sibling that's had it, or you know another kid that's had it, sometimes they tell parents to take them out into the cold air or stand in front of the freezer and let them breathe cold air because that helps with some of the inflammation. But it's this incessant cough that you can cough so much that you throw up kind of a thing. And they'll give you Decadrone a lot of the time to make it stop or to help make it better. But Decadrone can turn a kid into a toddler-sized monster in like 12 hours. So, which I've experienced. So it's fun. Not with him, the other one. So yeah, Drew got croup twice. And the first time I was like, this is not fun. And the second time they told me he had croup, just kill me now. Because these next couple days are going to be horrible. Yeah.
Does it shrink them to make them tougher size?
Yeah, no, he was already that size. So it's usually little kids that get that. So when you're looking here at some structural stuff.
Shrink
Imagine
them down
if
to
your child
little-
is just shrinking before you, in a few days.
No, they're little and then they go crazy. So here we have a triglyceride, a phospholipid, and a steroid. These are just some examples of structure. A fatty acid here. And then, do you remember we talked about micelles? What were the micelles? Do you remember? We talked about them when we were talking about surfactants.
They surround the water.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you have your hydrophilic head, which means it likes water, and your hydrophobic tail, which means it doesn't like water. And it forms this little ball basically. And do you remember, like, you can buy micellar water at the store to clean your face with because it has these little things in it. And the thought is that if there's grease somewhere on your skin or whatever, it'll suck the grease and hold it inside the middle, keep it away from you. I don't know if it works any better, but
I'm guessing the micelles are three-dimensional, so they,
completely. Yep, absolutely.
once they form, they look a bit like bubbles.
Yes, like bubbles. So you've got your fatty tail on the inside and then your watery or polar part on the outside, right? And then this is what we call a lipid layer, a lipid bilayer. And this, this kind of thing, when we get into biology, we'll talk more about. But so that's a phospholipid there. All right, now we talk about proteins. Proteins are fun. This is actually some really interesting stuff, I think. So your proteins are organic compounds and they're made of amino acids. So amino acids we call the building blocks of proteins. That's what we call them, right? And sometimes you'll see memes with them and it'll have like this angry little thing. It'll say it's amino acid. Have you seen that? Oh, come on. That's a great dad joke. I see that one all the time. Maybe because I follow nerdy science sites on social media, but it's like, it's amino acid. So there are actually only 20 amino acids that we know of. So some we can produce, some we cannot, but we need. So we have to get them from food. So a protein is a bunch of amino acids that are arranged in a linear chain. And they're joined together between the carboxyl atom of one amino acid and the amine nitrogen of another. You don't have to know that part by heart, but it's kind of like Legos, where you've got, the nubby end and then the end with the little, what do you call that? I'm sure there's a word for it. The end with the holes and the end with the nubs. I'm sure there's a Lego word. There's Lego terms for all of it. None of you know. Gosh, y'all have failed me with your Lego terminology.
Indent,
Some
outdent.
Lego word.
If they were plugs, you'd say the male end and the female end or whatever, but you know what I mean.
Indent, outdent.
Indent, outdent. There you go. Indent, outdent. I like that. All right, so your proteins. The
indentational
bonds,
connection.
What now?
The indentational connection.
There you go. Indentational connection. So where you've got these bonds going on, it's called a peptide bond. And the sequence of acid in a protein is defined by a gene that's encoded in the code. Okay, so today in lab, you took codons, and you took a codon, and you found the word, and then you found another codon, and another codon, and another codon. So you can almost think it's not going to relate directly, but you can almost think of one sentence that you made today as one amino acid, okay? And then that amino acid would join with another amino acid. If the sentences made sense back to back, you could have put a paragraph together, right? And then that would be a protein. And that protein, all the data that it took to make the paragraph, that whole piece of genetic code would be your gene, okay? So, and that's happening rapidly, faster than you can time, constantly, incessantly inside most cells of your body.
And then those paragraphs form into an essay, a book, something like that.
Yeah, sure. And so that would be, so say you've got one protein coded for, well, that, what kind of protein is it? Are we talking about something that's going, so embryologically, that's fascinating. So is this going to be, is this gene coding for a protein that's going to produce muscle tissue, integumentary system, neurological tissue? All of that is in these massive sections of genetic code, right? And then it produces one tiny component. And then you have to put all those components together to make any kind of structure. And some of the structure is just becomes the cellular structure itself. It's not even anything that's being sent out into the rest of the organism. So it's crazy when you think about it, how itty bitty becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So although the genetic code specifies 20 standard amino acids, I don't know, the residues in a protein are often chemically altered. It's weirdly worded, but anyway, in a post-transitional modification. So either before the protein can function in the cell or as part of the control mechanisms. So when we talk about mutations in DNA, so you remember today, there were a couple times some of you came up to me and you were like, this sentence doesn't make sense. There's a word in here that doesn't quite go. There was one word and it just didn't quite make sense. That's sort of akin to how mutations happen. It's in that transcribing process. So if I gave you a big long line of numbers, if I just started spitting out numbers, you guys cool? And I told you to write them down. And somewhere along the way, you missed one of the numbers I said, or you wrote the wrong one. That's how mutations happen. Every one of us is full of mutations, tons and tons and tons. It just happens. It's part of the process. Nothing's perfect, right? Sooner or later, something's gonna screw up. So, but if you have, you good? If you have the wrong kind of mutation, it can be impactful. Some are not. Some you have and you have no idea you even have them. They're not impactful at all. Others are impactful and they'll cause some phenotypical appearance where you look at somebody and go, well, that's different. And then there are others that just get passed on. So that's how we have variety, for example, within a genetic pool. So that's how you have blue eyes, brown eyes, darker skin, lighter skin, brown hair, blonde hair. All those things are due to various genetic mutations.
That's also how evolution happens, isn't it?
Correct. Without mutations, it wouldn't function. The whole Darwinian concept wouldn't function the way it does. Now, he didn't have the understanding of how the mutations occur that we have, which is, so that's interesting because what he could tell is that there were features, in particular with the finches that he looked at. Well, some finches have beaks that are better tailored for this type of food, and others have beaks that are better tailored for this type of food. But he couldn't have explained how that difference occurred. Now we understand how the difference occurred. And some mutations are fatal. It just, an organism won't survive. And it does depend sometimes on when the mutation occurs. Does it occur very early in embryologic development? Is it something crucial? Or does it occur later? Like there are some mutations that will say you can't produce a certain enzyme. And that enzyme may be necessary for life, or it may be, the kind of thing where you can be supplemented. It's interesting. It gets very, very granular. So proteins can work together to achieve a particular function, as they often associate to form stable complexes. And also, like other biological macromolecules, that word again means big molecules, macromolecules, such as polysaccharides and nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are our DNA bases, right? Those are the A, D, C, G, U, those ones you did today. Those are your nucleic acids. Proteins are essential parts of all living organisms and participate in every process within cells. So some of them are enzymes. What are enzymes? We talked about enzymes before.
Are they catalysts?
Yeah, natural catalysts, right? Exactly. Catalyze biochemical reactions that are vital to metabolism. So if you didn't have those particular enzymes, like I said, sometimes you have issues with metabolism. There can be all kinds of stuff. And then you have other proteins that have a structural or mechanical function. So here's an example. There are proteins that produce the cytoskeleton, which is basically scaffolding, maintaining cell shape. So you know that animal cells do not have that nice hard wall like plant cells do. You probably remember that, like I said, from whenever you did science when you were younger, littler. But there is still structure. And I don't know if you remember, but there's a cell membrane, and then inside there's a cytoplasm, and then all the little organelles, right? Well, there's still structure within that cytoplasm. It's not like a pure jelly bowl. There's stuff going on in there. And there are proteins that form these tiny, and get this, tubes, because when you think about structure, if you put a stick on the floor and put a weight on top of it versus a hollow cylinder and put a weight on top of it, which one is stronger? Yeah, but say they're the same material.
Depends on what size.
Same material, same size. Cylinders are strong, is my point, right? Well,
If they're the same size,
mm,
then a hollow cylinder would be worse than a stick of the same size.
height,
Oh,
I meant.
I was also talking.
You were thinking that, yeah.
Yes.
So if you think about it, cylinders are very strong structures, right? In general, we're talking in general. And it took humans a little while to figure that out. And we started using them in architecture, but our bodies and other animal bodies have been using tubular structures just at the microscopic level inside of our cells for structural purposes since the beginning of life. So some proteins just do that. And then they are important in signaling, immune response, cell adhesion, cell cycle, all this stuff, all these things that we'll get into next year that are all functions of life, all involve proteins. They're a necessary component of our diet. So here's where I was saying there are 20 that we use, but we do not produce all 20 amino acids. 20 amino acids that we use, but not 20 that we produce. So where do we get the ones that we don't produce?
Plants.
Animals, plants, everything, whatever we eat, right? So, but here's the crazy thing. So I want you to visualize this. So you have a delicious cheeseburger put in front of you. All right. It's like grade A grass-fed beef. This is good stuff. And you're psyched about it. So I want you to imagine that the protein molecules within that are like an awesome Lego structure made of a whole bunch of different Legos. And those are like the amino acids that make up that protein, right? It's very specific. Like you can't take some random Legos and create this exact object. You have to have the right stuff. So you have the right stuff together. All right. When you chow down on the hamburger, all of those amino acids that are in that protein, it's like your body takes that Lego structure and goes boom. And now they're everywhere. So now you have amino acids just everywhere. And then you can take them and restructure them into anything you want. So perhaps this was cow muscle to begin with, because that's what meat is. But your body's going to take some of those amino acids and turn it into keratin, and now you have hair or collagen, or it's going to turn it into new skin or nervous tissue, or it's going to turn it into intercellular structure. But all of that came from the cow muscle. And where did the cow get it from? Well, she got it from grass, wherever she got it from,
So
or grain.
would it be possible to have a full head of hair off of just the one end? Like if you were to only eat just like a ribeye steak for like let's just say a month and a half, would you basically have a full head of ribeye hair? Is that what
Ribeye hair, that would be amazing because I would have so much hair. Maybe that's why I have a lot of hair. I do like ribeyes. It's not quite that direct every time, but there are some amino acids that you can't produce and you have to get them from food sources. But the whole point is that it comes to you as one unit. You break it down. And then it's like you take all those little Legos that are all over the floor and you construct something completely new. You use those same building blocks, but you create your own structure out of it that's yours. And that's how it works, which is real. I think that's very cool. So through the process of digestion, animals break down ingested protein into free amino acids that can be used for protein synthesis. So proteins are formed by condensation of amino acids. So what's that mean, condensation?
Creation of water.
Yep, you've got a water that comes out of it. Exactly. So here are some examples of what some of them look like. These are amino acid side chains, they're called. This is, like I told you, sometimes when you get into organic chemistry, it gets really in the weeds. But these are the side chains here. So if you notice, this little part here isn't changing, right? Here's glycine. And then pop on 1H. And then this, we got the same little structure here to begin with. And then we're going to pop on this chain. And then we're going to pop on this chain. So these they call side chains. These are non-polar ones. These are polar ones. These are acidic and these are basic. So there's many, many different side chains that you can combine with this base unit to form different amino acids. So this here is just another graphic example of upstream and downstream dehydration synthesis. Well, there you go. You take the water out of the way, and then these two can combine.
That's so graphic, I don't even want to see it.
Right? It's so graphic. Oh my gosh. So here's your peptide bond, right? Which is joining your amino acids together to make a protein. So if you're going to take the water out, you're going to synthesize a protein. And there, what do you call it if you take the water out and you have a water all by itself? It's either condensation or what's the other one? Dehydration, right? One or the other. And then what's it called if you have to cut it by sticking the water in?
Elimination?
Huh?
Elimination?
Hydrolysis. There you go. Hydrolysis. So you're going to cut it with the water, break them apart. That's hydrolysis. You're going to join them together. It's condensation because the water's all by itself. Now it's you've literally formed the water, unlike condensation we see on our glasses or whatever, right? And then, or also dehydration because you have removed the water from it. So the form and function of a protein depends on its, that should be depends. See, that's one of two. Depends on its three-dimensional shape. All right, so, and I just pointed out that plural there, or not plural, but verb form there. So this is what we mean by they can look very different and have different three-dimensional shapes. So you've got proteins that can form helixes, polypeptide chains. Y'all good over there? I'm telling you, man.
We're separated.
This is
Yeah.
where the not
It's
okay
freaking me
people
out,
are,
that's why.
He always picked on you. Quaternary structures. So here are just some many examples of the way protein molecules could look. All right, so here's where you find proteins in your body. Just some examples. So in your immune system, you got antibodies. Have you had COVID? If you've had it, you've made some antibodies to it. Those are proteins. If you haven't had it and you've had the shot, they're still trying to give you stuff so you can make antibodies, right? And complement system, which is part of the immune system. 20 molecules that are activated during infections. Immune system is super complex, and next year we hit it at the very end of the year, and we only touch on it briefly because, huh? Just like organic? Yeah, kind of. Immune system is very, very complex. It does have a lot of chemistry involved, probably more than some of the other biological concepts we're going to go over. So you have proteins and muscles, obviously. Okay, actin and myosin. Anybody heard of actin and myosin? Do you know how they work?
I think I've heard of it.
Okay, so actin and myosin are super cool. And when we get into molecular function in muscles, we'll talk about it a lot next year. But you got basically two molecules that work together. One of them looks like, I'm not gonna be able to draw it for you. One of them, okay, picture something that's got like a bunch of little divots in it. Like, what's a good example of something like that?
Wait.
Road full of potholes.
No, maybe
Waves?
like what? Like waves, kind of, yeah. All right,
Speed
but
bumps in the road.
completely even. Okay, you got one molecule like that, and the other one looks almost like a hammerhead. All right, so it fits in,
Uh-huh.
and then it locks, and then a little chemical reaction happens, and it shifts and goes into the next notch, and it locks like a ratchet.
Yeah.
That is exactly how your muscles contract.
Yeah.
And that is actin and myosin. Those are the proteins involved, and it's a ratcheting process. It's click, 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 click. relax, just like a ratchet if you've ever used one.
Why does it get bigger when you tense up?
Because you're contracting it all together. So you're basically taking the same material and condensing it into a smaller space. So it's looking right. And then myoglobin releases oxygen to your muscles. Ferritin stores and releases oxygen. Ferritin, what do we notice about that word? Look at that word.
Has iron.
It has iron in it. There's your Fe, right? Okay. So here we have over here red blood cells, hemoglobin. Do you remember? And do you remember that you have to have iron in order to transport oxygen? Well, here it is right here. It stores and releases. You need it for that transport. It stores it for the transport and it releases it. And it's even got the Fe written right in it. Completely essential. What's it called if you don't have enough iron? Do you know?
Iron deficiency.
Okay. Is there another word for that? Anemia. You ever heard of anemia? There you go. Anemia. Yep. So your structural proteins. So you have cytoskeleton, which I was saying is that structure within your cells that gives them some strength and rigidity a little bit. And the tubules, they call them filaments and tubules. Tiny, 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 tiny cylinders, right? And they help maintain cell shape. Keratin. Keratin is in your skin, your hair, your nails. Sometimes you can get a keratin treatment. I buy them, little package of stuff, slap it in your hair, smooth it on. It kind of squashes all into your hair structure, helps keep it smooth, strong, that good stuff. And then collagen. Okay, so collagen provides strength. Collagen you're going to find in your skin and hair and nails, yes, but you're also going to find collagen in all your joints, your ligaments. It is in all your connective tissues. So everything that holds all your skin cells together, everything that holds your skin onto your body, your muscles to your muscles, everything that's holding together is held together by what? Collagen. And so collagen is of particular interest to me because people that have autoimmune diseases like lupus and that sort of thing, those are, they call them as a group, connective tissue disorders. And I think as more research is done, we're going to find that it's a collagen issue for sure. It's a matter of which collagen is that issue, because there are a bunch of different collagens. There's like collagen 6, collagen 4, collagen whatever. And right now we take this whole group of autoimmune disorders and say, well, they're connective tissue disorders. And we're going to call this one Sjogren's syndrome, and we're going to identify it by symptoms. And then we're going to call this one scleroderma, and we're going to identify it by symptoms. But I'm thinking in the future, when my doctor and I were chit-chatting, it may become something like collagen 6 disorder, collagen 4 disorder, because they'll be able, hopefully, to link it, which would make treatment for people who deal with it better, because it's not always great. Elastin. So what does elastin sound like it does?
Elastic.
Provides flexibility. So elastin, some people have more than others and are more flexible. If you do gymnastics, or if you've done dance or anything that requires you to be flexible or any kind of athletics, you're probably hoping for more elastin. Interestingly, like I know you dance, so interestingly, elastin is a protein that the human body produces in larger amounts during pregnancy for the purpose of allowing a pelvis to spread for birth. So women can actually become more flexible when they're pregnant until the belly gets in the way and you can't do anything anyway. But until you get so big that you can't move, you can become more flexible. And certainly pelvis does become more flexible. It allows the pelvic bones to actually separate to a degree, which otherwise would not happen.
I would hope so.
Yeah, right? And then you've got signaling proteins like cytokines. And so cytokines have been in the news lately too with COVID, because cytokines, there's something called a cytokine storm, but it's basically when your body completely overreacts with, it's an inflammatory response. And when it gets out of control, it can be deadly and it can be really, really scary. And there are people that can get cytokine storm there's various things that can cause it. But some people dealing with COVID that were hospitalized did experience cytokine storms. And it can be really, really bad. Like I know child nearly died with it a couple of years ago. It was really scary. And that wasn't COVID related, completely different. So you got proteins in bloods, hemoglobin, you know what that is. It's in your red blood cells. You have to have it to carry oxygen, right?
Has iron in it.
Yep, has iron in it. Okay, and then I can't because I'm reading fibrinogen. So fibrinogen you think about this one here, it clots the blood. Well, look at the word fibrid. You see fiber kind of in there. It's exactly what it looks like. Little fibers, little hairs. And you need that if you're going to clot. And clotting comes from platelets. So this is the kind of thing you would find in platelets. If you've ever seen a great graphic of it, but your little platelets are floating around in your blood, minding their own business. And if you start bleeding, they end up at the site where you're bleeding and they just blow up.
Yeah.
Right? They just, boom, yeah, they blow up and spill their guts everywhere. And this is the kind of stuff that's in their guts. And that's how you get a scab. Now, if you are a hemophiliac, that's the sort of thing you are lacking is platelets. And so hemophilia is a very recessive disorder. It's not something that gets passed easily, but it is something that was really prevalent in some European royal families because they interbred so much in order to keep their royal bloodlines doing what they do. God forbid you let anybody else in, right?
Maybe that's why the Queen's lips are long. She has some deficiency.
Well, she definitely isn't deficient because she's doing great.
But like weird.
But there have been figures in the monarchy that were hemophiliac. And it's extremely dangerous because if you're a hemophiliac and you get a cut, you don't stop bleeding that easily. You just bleed. So a minor cut can cause lots of bleeding. And you certainly aren't going to send your hemophiliac king out to war on his horse unless you're really stupid and you want to watch him get like a nick and die on the battlefield, and that's embarrassing, right? So I mean that's
overthrow.
like for real.
That sounds like a pretty good idea.
Hey, let's go overthrow them. I heard all you have to do is nick that guy and we're in. You know, I mean it's
Yeah.
right,
Okay, you die.
Just give them a paper cut.
right, exactly. So then you have digestive enzymes, which we talked about before, right? We discussed these a little bit when we talked about enzymes. You need them to break down certain things that you eat. And then cell membranes. So they form channels for substances to move through a membrane. So you think about a cell membrane, you think of it as something that keeps everything inside, but they are not impermeable. They're not only permeable, but they have little channels all over the outside that let things in, let things out. There are like these little chemical gates that open and close. You can come in, no, you can't. You can go out, no, you can't. Very, very complex. So something that's so microscopic is like a massive factory, really like a city functioning. They get very, very complex at that level. So they act as enzymes, act as receptors. And when we talk about receptors, this has to do a lot with communication too, especially when you're talking about nervous cells, neurons in general. So neurons have synapses and they have dendrites and things that pick up information from the cell. There's always a little jump, like this one is sending out information and this one's ready to receive it. And it has to jump to get there. This is like the magnet. There's a receptor here. There's a protein that goes, come here, come here, come here. And that's like, yeah, it's like serotonin is one of them. So if you are somebody like people who had depression, sometimes they'll give them serotonin reuptake inhibitors or SSRIs like Prozac. That allows for more of the neurotransmitter, in this case serotonin, to stay in the synapse, to just kind of float there. More of it stays there because it's a reuptake inhibitor, which means you've got more to pull from when you need it. And then there are 3 types of proteins: peripheral proteins, integral proteins, and lipid-bound proteins. All right, so your homework, which you're turning in, I believe, but we'll still go over these anyway. So classify the following carbohydrates into monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides. So you have cellulose, lactose, starch, maltose, sucrose, chitin, and fructose.
And glucose.
And glucose. Oh, I didn't read it. And then identify 3 side chains found in amino acids, draw 3 amino acids that have them, blah, 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 blah. All right. So if we're categorizing, we had some nice little flow charts earlier, but how about we go with cellulose? Was it mono, di, or poly?
Poly.
Great. And so we have a whole list here. I'll just do it this way. So your polys are going to be your cellulose, your starch, and your chitin. Monos are glucose, fructose. The polys are cellulose, starch, and chitin. Ozzy, that is not a smart place to chase your tail. Like, you will fall. He chases his tail all the time.
Is it itch? or is
No,
it-
it's just fun. He's bored.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows it's attached to him clearly.
You
But-
got it. You can
And,
do it
and it
legally.
hurts, right?
I suppose if he bites it hard enough, But he was, Sydney's trying to save him.
You will believe. You
It's
believe.
here.
Let him pause it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, he'll fall off the back.
He's jumped off of
Yeah.
this several
He
times.
jumped off every day.
He did this morning.
Last time we were here, I think he jumped off. I was like,
Hey, look. Look at this. What's that? Hey, what is that?
Is that not the first time?
Turn around the floor. Hey, what's this? Get it. There you go. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes he'll get a hold of it and he'll just run. There he goes.
There we go.
It's great, isn't it? I mean,
Maybe he doesn't want to have it. He's trying to rip it off.
if you're this easily amused, I mean, it would be amazing. And he bites at the very base of his tail and then he falls over. I mean, for real, like what are you doing here? What are you doing? There you go. So, anyway,
He's like,
I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid. Yeah. So here are their answers. Your monos are your glucose, fructose. Your dis are lactose, maltose, sucrose. And your polys are cellulose, starch, and chitin. It's ridiculous. And then he does something like this, like, I didn't look dumb. You didn't see me. You know? You gotta love it. Oswald, are you good? Oswald. All right. So identify 3 side chains found in amino acids. There's lots of answers. Here are some of the ones that your book gave as possible answers. But I think they were all in a, were they in a table or something like that? Yeah, they were in a table.
I wasn't sure.
What was it?
The answers, I think they were in a table in your book. I was trying to remember.
I just looked up the structures of the different.
There you go. So draw 3 amino acids that have these side chains. Okay, there's lots of things you could have drawn, but if you look in table 2 in your book, they're there, right? And the drawing them is hard to find. Like I asked the junior class, I said, what's your favorite protein food? Find out some of the proteins that are in it. Like, is it eggs, cheese, beef, whatever, and try and draw them. And Lily comes up to me and she's like, I couldn't draw that thing. I'm like, it's okay. I get it. They're weird. I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing? All right.
he's spacing out.
And then what property do each of these side chains have? So
my phone.
cysteine covalently bonds to other cysteine units, if that's the one you use. Glutamic acid is acidic, glycine acts as a spacer, valine is nonpolar. So there's lots of options you could have had there as potential answers, right? So anyway, take some time to, if you already turned it in, awesome. If you're confident with your answers, great. If you're not confident with your answers, I'm gonna leave that there for a minute. So yeah, you can go ahead and look at what's there. Make changes if you need to make changes. That dog is so spoiled.
I mean, I would, but you know.
So next week, we're gonna go over DNA. And then in our lab, we're gonna look at our own DNA. Cole, shh, shh, shh. And then our lesson, that will be the last lesson is next week. So this week is your last homework, right? There's a lab after that, but you should be able to finish that in class and not have to take it home. So then this is it. Just this week is the last homework. Mhm. And then yeah, and then you got to get your projects done if that's what you're getting at over there.
I know.
Homework inside science work at home.
That's fine. Just send it to me. It's okay. I know. All right. So you guys, I'm going to give you a couple extra minutes. Get yourselves ready for Spanish spread out and stretch. Our lessons are more surface level these next week or two, so we're good. And y'all are welcome to, of course, look at your
Yeah, I
study
got
guides and
4 absolutely, completely wrong. But you know what?
just change them. It's fine. You got time. Ozzy, you are a nerd. Look at you. Oh.
See, when I think of steroids, I think of baseball because I think of the Bash Brothers because I think of